Okay, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the House Human Services Committee. This morning, we are going to be taking testimony on S206, an act relating to the licensure of early childhood educators by the Office of Professional Regulation. And for people who are following along online, Deputy Commissioner McLaughlin has a slide deck, but they are not appearing on the screen. I know, they look like they're maybe going to be happening soon, but if you want, you can also tune in to our committee's webpage where you can find her slide deck under her name on the House Human Services website. So, and just as I say that, they appear.
There you go.
And welcome, Janet. It's nice to see you again. And the floor is yours. You know what we're talking about.
I do. So, good morning, everybody. Janet McLaughlin, Deputy Commissioner within the Department of Children and Families that oversees the Child Development Division, which you guys all know is sort of all things childcare, children's integrated services, and joint responsibility for our Universal Free Kindergarten with Agency of Education. I apologize I wasn't able to be with you guys last week. I was away. I will say one of the things I was doing while I was away was I was invited to go to the Stanford Institute for Economic and Policy Research, and they had like a day-long childcare forum, and they wanted to hear about what's happening in Vermont. So it was pretty interesting and fun to hear about what's happening in New Mexico and San Francisco, and also hear about how some of these top economists are starting to develop new models that can allow us to think through costs and projections and economic impacts of some of the investments being made in childcare here in Vermont,
cool.
Across the state. So
they're paying attention to childcare. That's awesome.
Yeah, I was like, I talked to somebody who she was like, oh, at Stanford, who she was like, oh, I teach a course, a graduate level course on the economics of early childhood. And I was like, you do? Like I did it, like amazing. Like, so it was nice to see that respect for the field in that environment.
That's awesome.
And I have attempted to just listen to a lot of the testimony that you guys have heard already. I don't promise that I've heard every single bit of it, but I've heard a lot of it. Also on like 1.2 by 1.5 speed. So I may have missed a couple of details as I was trying to run through it. Some of these slides I've prepared for other committees that don't know this topic quite as well. But obviously you guys know the world of regulated childcare in Vermont. We have this, childcare map now on our, on the CED website that can allow you to sort in all sorts of different ways. But if people are curious about those pieces.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
I haven't gone on the website, but seeing here, I'll go on the website and
Yes.
check it out. That's
And we have a couple other dashboards that we're sharing as well. This went up. It might have gone up in January or it was either December.
Have the links in your presentation here?
It's down at the bottom. It's not a hot link, but you can cut that.
Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. Not right there. Okay.
Yeah. So that's great. I mean, and again, when we have a new data system, what?
It is hot. I just
great.
checked it.
Perfect. Okay. We have a new, when we transition out of our Bright Futures information system into CDAS for our childcare licensing data, then this tool will get even better. Because right now in our database, there's not even a space for programs to enter what their website is. Thus, we cannot hot link it right through this. So somebody does, you can find out all this information, but then you would have to separately say, okay, here's the place to get go to that program's website. But for people that are looking at things from a bigger picture policy level perspective, it's helpful.
So since you mentioned it, and we probably won't have an opportunity to have you back.
Yes.
Can you just give us a brief update on the CDDIS?
Yep. So CDDIS, right, the Child Development Division Information System. The first phase of the work was getting childcare financial assistance into that new model and that into that program, and that happened. We we are in contract. We've selected a vendor and in contract negotiations for the second phase of the CDDIS build, which is to move the childcare licensing and workforce registry functions out of the Bright Futures information system and put it into a more modern system. The Bright Futures information system is built on a platform that's no longer supported by the vendor, which means we can't update it. And it's also and so it makes it really fragile too, in terms of, and it does go down semi-regularly. And there's a lot of, there's a lot of workarounds, lots of last minute fixes. So that is, I think the hope is that we'll have that contract in place by July, and then it'll be probably, I think the hope is an 18-month process to get us to the new system, which will really help with a lot of the data that I know everybody's interested in.
Will that system be able to, you just talked about in licensing, so there's a lot of data that you collect in licensing process. Will that be a searchable kind of thing for the public?
Yeah, I mean, so there's some parts of it that are public and some parts of it that are private even now, right? And so, yes, it will improve what is available to the public. Right now, you still do see all of the site visit reports, any violations, any corrective action. So, what the license capacity is, who the key contacts are. And so you can get a decent chunk of information, but we do have some federal non-compliances for not having some of the information available that we would want to have available to the public are related to talking points or things that are sort of coming out of a site visit that don't reach the level of being cited as a violation, but we still tell the programs about them and we're supposed to share that publicly, and we don't have a vehicle to be able to make that part of the public report right now without busting the whole system. And also, again, when we suspend a program's license right now, that pulls them right off the public view of the portal. And that's actually the most important time for the public to have access to that information. And so we do workarounds with that, right? Like and it's public records requests get that information, reporters get that information. We try to make sure families get that information, but those are a couple of the things that will get adjusted, in addition to just being really much more efficient. It takes our business techs, 72 clicks to enter somebody's record, like records in when a new staff person. One of the things, sort of taking this back to 206, one of the things that people have talked about is being, as a benefit of 206, is being able to know the qualifications of the staff who are working with your children. And would that be a searchable thing in the new database? I mean, in terms of the qualifications or it's definitely not built into the requirements right now.
Yeah.
Because it is, because it's not part of our regulatory framework right now, right? So it's not built in the requirements in terms of that being public, and we would have to think about what would be the regulatory framework that would allow us to share people's information in that way. It's not, we haven't, when people get hired by a childcare program at this moment, they're not agreeing to have necessarily have that information be publicly searchable.
Yeah. We're here also trying to balance, what investments to make where, and, where we might be able to make information available to the public that they have an interest in seeing and making decisions about their child. So you make a little note about that.
Yes.
And what, especially as you're entering into negotiations and thinking about.
And for all you guys know, it's an extensive process. It's an extensive process to document all of the requirements, because childcare licensing is actually really complicated, right? And but there are definitely places where we can make, change orders and things like that over time. So it's not like once it's in there now or it's never in there.
Yeah.
But when you're adding something new, right? Obviously, there's some additional money, and those things, we usually get those costed out as we go on, how much a new feature would cost.
Yeah.
And
for that.
okay, so I have a few slides that I think address what sort of are some of the major decision points associated with this bill. I will offer that the administration's position right now is officially neutral. And so what I'm sharing with you is sort of our policy analysis of this bill. I see my job right now is making sure you guys really have accurate information for the decisions that you guys are making. So you guys know this, right? That we do regulate childcare facilities, right, that don't have an exemption. Right, the regulation,
What's the exemption?
oh, there's so many exemptions, right, to people that don't have to be regulated, right? So if you're, you know, so that could be, right, if you're running a, you know, religious services, right, you don't need to have your Sunday school be regulated for childcare. If you're a hospital that's bringing together a group of children, you know, in a care environment, you don't need to be regulated as a childcare. Also, right, we know there's big exemptions for like recreation programs or skill-based activities, right? Like your soccer team doesn't need to be a regulated childcare program. So it's all of those things. And then also some of the summer, like for school age children, especially if programs last less than, I can't remember, 12 weeks or 11 weeks, then they don't have to be regulated either. But again, I know this bill doesn't, you know, sets aside school age children as people who have other people who are their primary educators. And then the other, right, what the headline here is just providing care. This for persons providing care for children from more than two families other than their own, which is definitely a big topic of conversation in other committees, but I think you guys understand that piece of it. But there is a space for family, friend, and neighbor care or trusted caregiver care within Vermont's construct right now. Again, the regulations are designed to provide the foundation of health and safety, as well as for the healthy development of young children. And they are guided by federal and state statutes and informed by best practice standards from the American Academy of Pediatrics. So those are, when we're doing a licensing regulation revision, which right now we're, in the process of getting things ready to be submitted up to, I think it's the interagency committee first, right, before the legislative committee. We are, again, looking at what the rules are actually we have to follow, and then we're looking at what the best practice guidelines we see, and especially, and the American Academy of Pediatrics has some great information on those foundational safety standards. Again, I think you guys know this, but again, right now we do approve and monitor who is working in all regulated childcare programs. We do approve individuals to work in specific roles based on their standards that are laid out in childcare licensing regulations. And we contract with Northern Lights at CCV to verify qualifications, professional development hours, and required trainings. And that's what informs our approvals to work in specific positions, and allows everybody to sort of maintain compliance with state and federal standards. This bill will require CVD to would change a little bit our role and approach related to ECE staff. I would also offer, we don't necessarily think the thing we're doing is the best thing ever and, is perfect and doesn't need improvement. So I just want to offer that, like, we're not, we can, you'll see in the next slides, and we can see some pros to working with, you can see some pros to working with Office of Professional Regulation in this work.
Did you see a change in your staff? Did you see any reduction in your staff as a result of this, or?
Well, I mean, right now we contract out with Northern Lights. We contract out to Northern Lights.
They verify all of the.
To verify all the qualifications.
Qualifications, okay.
And if that work is simplified, or on the workforce verification side of things, then that would be where I think that would be where we would see the change. That said, we also can see that, Northern Lights also plays a really important role for us in terms of providing that training, both the entry level trainings and especially the ongoing professional development or continuing education for programs and verifying those pieces of it. But again, and then also doing career advising to people within their early childhood education space. So there certainly is still a really important role, and that work might actually fit better with what CCV's core competencies are in terms of providing, that career and education advice, as well as providing the education and training that people need for specific jobs.
So one of the things when we had testimony from them, I'm trying to correct me if I'm wrong, but Northern Lights is not, credit oriented.
That's correct.
And so would you see, would you, work with them to, try to modify that? Because, and yeah, you can go through the assessment of prior learning. But if you're doing that, if you're already taking professional development with an organization that can issue credits, why would you have to do that twice, I guess is.
Yeah, well, so you wouldn't if you got your training from an organization that was issuing college credits, then that's on your transcripts.
Yeah.
But if you're getting professional development hours, like, so CCV, like they're aware, like they're working hard across all sorts of fields, right? To create stackable credentials, right? And to create micro credentials that can stack to each other, they add up to this course, and so they absolutely have that in mind and can certainly think about, like, again, this is a long runway. There would be a way for us to say, okay, here's the first, this is a 1 credit course, right? And then here's the stack onto it that creates that is going to allow you to, meet your true infant or early childhood education 3 credit course, right? Like they can, I think that my experience with CCB is that they can manage those things, and they do it across multiple fields. So I think, and I mean, that's part of what's nice, that they offer both the PD hours and then right through the college, it's, through their credit bearing and degree seeking work, if you've taken that professional development training for CCV, it's very easy for them to say, aha, this meets that standard. And again, because CCV does verify the continuing education that people are getting right now, they are able to, they have a whole protocol that says, okay, this addresses this competencies, this is the level of evidence you need to provide. That's associated with the person who's that's evaluating the course. And so, I mean, I think they're really skilled at making those transitions. And I think everybody is oriented to try and make that work. And I mean, I think that's been one of the problems so far, right? Is that people can take hundreds of hours of professional development and it doesn't add up to anything for them, right? Besides the fact, sure, they can keep working in the field, but it doesn't add up to a credential, even though they've probably done all of the work that they would need to have something that could be a
I guess
credential.
that's the basis for my question. So why hasn't that happened already? Northern Lights been in existence for quite a while now, and it's located at CCV. And so I'm just trying to figure out why, maybe in your work with them, that hasn't been something that's been encouraged or pushed to do this, micro stacking stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've made progress. I do think we've made progress over time, but also a lot of what they're doing, right, is they offer, right now in regulation, right, people need to have 15 hours of professionals, the basic standard, like the most common standards, people need to have 15 hours of professional development hours each year. And so some people are going to do that by going to the Vermont AYC conference for 2 days, and they're going to get, 10 hours of their training there. And then there's going to be a training, their center might bring in a trainer for a full day training, so they are, and that's what they needed. That's what they felt like was the best thing for them at that point. They're maybe with their director. So, but if you're doing it that way, it doesn't add up to something that is not quite this, it's not quite a straight line, but that's where assessment of prior learning comes in, is to say, I can see that you've done this combination of training and this combination of experience, adds up to this many credits. So I think that's been, I think that there's more to do. I think this is part of where, as the field has gotten a lot clearer on agreeing on set national early childhood education competencies, that's relatively recent. And again, I don't remember when the NYSE competencies were officially released, but maybe 5 to 7 years ago, officially they were established, which we also know is COVID times. And so some of those things that, took a little longer to get adapted throughout, but that's where, in Vermont, that's the thing that we've done, right? Is we've taken our, we used to have a separate set of Vermont early childhood competencies. And now we're well, actually the children in Vermont really are very similar developmentally to the children all over the United States. And we can probably use the national, the national competencies for early childhood educators. But again, that was a process, right? We had Vermont ones. We needed to go through the process of, educating, go through our, our professional development preparation committee work to like figure out, to agree that, yes, we're going to move to those competencies. AOE did the same thing, right, for their educators' licenses. When they renewed their standards for people who are getting AOE licenses in EC and ECSC, so early childhood special education, right? They decided, okay, yep, we're going to root everything in what those NAEYC competencies, what those NAEYC early childhood education competencies are. So we're taking like all the different steps. Like there's just so many building blocks to get you to say, okay, we've all agreed, this is the framework. So,
I just am thinking about, as people think about what the additional requirements might be, they're going to want to make sure that the time and energy that they're spending is going to help them move to that level. And so if Northern Lights, it's done great work so far.
Yeah.
But they will need to change in order to stay relevant, I guess is what I'm.
Yeah, no, I think that, and I think they're right there with us on that. And I mean, I think you guys, heard, like the head of Northern Lights at CCB, is on the National Commission around Excellence in Professional Education. So she's very rooted in what these standards are and what and what that trajectory is. So I think, but I think everybody is pulling in the same direction.
Yeah.
Okay. I made this chart. Maybe you guys all understand this already, but in other committees, people were confused about who is going to be impacted by this bill. So right now, there's about 7,000 people who work in early childhood education and regulated childcare settings. And there's about 4,500 people that are working in community-based, center-based childcare programs, and there's about 800 people working in family childcare. And we know in the bill that the public school operated programs are, while they are licensed by CDD for pre-K purposes, they, have a different pathway to verify educational credentials. So they're exempted from this bill. So it's really, again, the folks who are working in EC regulated settings and in family childcare. I wanted to, I think it's important to know that people who have AOE early childhood educators licenses, they work in all of these settings and none of these settings, right? So there's about 1,700 people who have an AOE educator's license and with an early childhood education, early childhood special education endorsement. And again, some of them are working in community-based programs, some of them are working in public schools, some of them are in family childcare, some of them are in, work for the state of Vermont. And they don't, they're not in teaching roles right now, or they work for, CCV or they work for University of Vermont, right? There's all sorts of roles that people can have, as mentors, as coaches, as teachers, as educators of educators. So, relative to sort of the question of like, is EC3 sort of the same thing and having the same purpose? Like, I don't think it is. I think that there's there's a lot of folks who are working working as infant toddler teachers, might be working in programs that, aren't that maybe aren't pre-K partners. It is, I don't think it's duplicative. And I think that for the folks that are committed enough in their career in this way, the fact that there's two pathways, like they'll be able to understand that. Like, I think the idea that people in the field won't understand that is, doesn't give them quite enough credit that they wouldn't be able to figure that out once they're at that stage in their career.
And you're probably not the right person to ask this question, but I didn't think of it before, but could there be some reciprocity?
Yeah.
Showing,
That is, well, the intention is, and Jennifer might be the best
Yeah, I was
person.
just
But
gonna say, I'm
it's,
just
but the
gonna-
intention is that EC, so an AOE educator's license, you know, if you hold an AOE educator's license, then you would not,
Right.
that will be recognized by CDD the same as an EC3.
Right.
So there is reciprocity that way. An EC3 would not be recognized by a agency of education the same as their license. Those standards are a little bit higher. This, you know, the requirements, especially related to student teaching, things like that are higher associated with an AOE educator's license. So it's not, doesn't go one way. It doesn't go from EC3.
It only goes one
AOE,
way.
It only goes one way. And yeah. Okay, I have 3 slides on what sort of what my sense is, or CDD's sense is, of what sort of the implications are for CDD and regulated childcare in terms of what we're seeing as like the biggest changes here. So the first is really around decision-making authority. This bill does change decision-making authority around who is qualified to work in early childhood education, right? And so it moves from a CDD-led rulemaking process, right, which I, as a political appointee, I have a decent amount of influence over what we set as the standards. However, right, there's no qualifications for my job, it turns out. And
You just found that out.
You definitely need them.
yeah, I haven't asked public administration, you guys, I promise. Right, 2, an OPR supported oversight board that is made up of early childhood educators. So to me, that feels like a fundamental difference in the approach to this work, in the approach to thinking about early childhood education qualifications. So our observations are, right, this aligns with the process that there is for teachers and for other professions. It would ensure that the decisions are made by those who have relevant credentials. It would leverage OPR's expertise and sort of OPR's existing systems for professional licensing. And it would change the role for CDD in terms of setting rules, granting variances, you know, maybe responding to concerns for staff qualifications. So that's just, you know, that's the change. To me, that's one of the biggest changes that's, you know, on the plate before you. I mean, I know that OPR had, you know, for example, during COVID, you know, CDD kind of did emergency variances for folks related to you know, who was qualified to work in positions. But so that might limit our role, but OPR would also has the opportunity to do, I think, that sort of variances and emergency variances and things like that. But it just would change who's making some of those decisions. We have, you know, OPR has really, I think, tried to do their homework. And so they have really reached out to us about what our processes are, what we've seen, what violations are out there. Like, and so I have no reason to believe that they wouldn't consult with us in making those decisions. But that would be the change. It would be a change sort of in that decision-making authority.
I guess my question
Mhm.
is, I mean, I think I agree with you. I think that's a major change. And so, it is a shift from, sort of, I guess I would say oversight and accountability being in one location, both for staffing and for program operations.
Right.
To now to 2 places. CDD would still have responsibility for the program and how it implements the requirements of being a licensed program, a regulated program.
Right.
But the staffing piece of it, which you have influence over now, would rest someplace else. And, you know, and I think you point out that that's not necessarily different than it is for some other professions. So teachers, you know, they have to maintain their own license, but it's kind of the school board who addresses, you know, at the local level, you know, what's happening in that location right there, or the you know, the administrator. So, you know, you said, right now the administration's position is neutral on that, but I do see that as a major change.
Mhm.
And I'm trying, I still haven't leveled in my head about, I know that CDD will not have any problem having, a, good working relationship with LBR, and vice versa. I think that that will be fine. I'm just trying to figure out if that complicates things from a public perspective,
Mhm.
or if that is more more transparent from a public perspective in terms of staff qualifications, especially given,
Mhm.
your response to the question I asked earlier on. So it would seem more transparent in terms of staff qualifications, the development of that system. Although I could see the ability for you to do the same thing. In terms of being, the public being able to access staff qualifications as part of your licensing process, your regulating process. Yeah, go ahead.
Following up on staff qualifications,
Yeah.
something that you're engaged in, is there anything that would prohibit CDD with its rulemaking authority or taking the lead in that process from going beyond qualifications to keeping track of problematic behaviors? Or, right now a center gets written up
Yep,
and that's public.
yep.
Is there anything that would prevent CDD from doing the same for individuals?
Well, we don't have the statutory authority to provide that for individuals right now, I don't think. So you guys, this was my next slide, so perfect, in terms of implications, right? It was around transparency and accountability, right? So it would, this does appear, right? This, again, I'm not saying it's the only way, but it does appear to be able to, the way that would provide consistent publicly available information about those who are serving young children. I do think it could leverage OPR processes that could make unprofessional conduct easier to identify and address. So right now, if there is like concerning behavior, right? Like we, CDD investigates, right? We can make we can give the program a violation, as you know. If it's rising to the level of a concern related to child abuse and neglect, right, we would refer that to the investigations unit within Family Services Division, right, and they would investigate child abuse and neglect concerns. They would, if somebody was substantiated for child abuse and neglect, right, they're out, right. But I think we all know, right, child abuse and neglect registry is not public, right? Am I right, guys? It's not public. People's names are not on it. Like you have to, right? Am I right, Jennifer? Okay. So you have to have, so just so you know that that's the standard right now, is that if you're substantiated for child abuse and neglect, like employers can apply to have access to check certain people's information.
Yeah.
So an employer could do that.
It's public to certain people.
To certain people, right.
Yeah.
But it's not to parents. It's not, right. It's not, right. So again, to sort of say this now needs to be public for something that's a lower standard of conduct. I don't know. I mean, I just feel like there's statutory and, questions there and regulatory questions there right now. And sorry, just kind of do two more things. So one is, right. And then obviously if it's moves beyond, if it gets to the level of criminal negligence, right? Like as soon as, both CDD and FSD, right, then work with law enforcement if it's something that we think is going to rise to that level, and that's happening. But there's the gap, right, is for those folks who, have unprofessional conduct that is not going to get substantiated for child abuse and neglect. But, as CDD, we feel like we have enough information to say that person really shouldn't be working with children. Right now, again, we have a way that we can say that person is prohibited from working with children based on information known to the division. Sometimes we're using that in a time when we know that a substantiation process is happening, right? So we, for a short period of time. But because the current regulatory framework is because the burden of proof is so much lower, we can't just prohibit people from having a job that they want to have for forever. Because there's not the due process sort of associated, or due process, I'm not a lawyer, so I shouldn't use legal words, but there's not the same structures associated with that. And so right now, if somebody is prohibited after they are, if somebody like who was on our list applies for a job to work within childcare, we do know who they, if they've worked in childcare in Vermont before, we know who they are, right? And so like everybody who's ever worked in Vermont is in our database. So we know that, and we would know who they are. We would say to that director, you need to apply for variance if you want to hire this person. We'd say to the person, like, you know that you're prohibited from working in childcare, so you need to go to whoever you're talking to, whoever wants to hire you, and you need to explain, and you need to decide if you want to explain to them what's happened, and then you're going to need to give us a plan at CDD as to why you're now safe to work with children, what have you done, like those sorts of pieces, but it's not, so that's the current I would say that's the current way that it's done. So again, it's not just that like somebody can necessarily walk from one regulated childcare program to another regulated childcare program. That we have some insight into, but for a standard for unprofessional conduct that does not meet the level of child abuse and neglect, we would not have a way to, at this moment, we don't have a way to say, this is not the field for you and you can't work in it anymore. And there's no public place for us to document that. No way for us to publicly, at this moment, there's no way for us to publicly document this is that person, this is that person, in case, again, somebody was trying to hire them for a job, potentially with children, but outside of regulated childcare.
I don't know that it's the case now. I don't believe that it is, but were there times when a CDD write-up of a regulated childcare program would include the name of the individual?
It does not have that now.
But at times in the past, that the name of the individual who was the cause of the infraction for the regulated program may have been included in the write-up.
I can get back to you on that. I do think you're right. I think it was a long time ago. I think they did move to now saying staff A, staff B, staff C. I assume that was because legal told us that's the right thing to do, given the level of evidence that is required for a childcare licensing violation versus a personal something. But that's our current practice. But I would have to check with legal sort of on what that rationale was on that. But yeah, go ahead.
Janet, the question, how often, when I'm thinking about this bill, I'm often thinking, what is the problem we're trying to solve? So just wondering, like, given the success we have with like kindergarten readiness and like, our kids, especially the younger ones, are doing really well. So I'm just curious, like, what are the numbers of these types of infractions or violations? Like, is it a substantial, just if you have any data on that, is how often is this happening where the individual is maybe trying to get a variance to work in a different location when they've been told, because that's the problem right now. That's the gap, right?
Yeah, that's part of the gap.
Yeah.
I have to get those numbers for you. It's not an overwhelming number, 10 to 20 people, like it's not an overwhelming number that are there. I do think so it's not a problem. It's not an overwhelming number. Okay, sorry. I'm gonna make my notes, check with legal names and okay. Okay. Right. So, well, let's talk about the points I have on the slide and what the observations are, right? Again, it is a venue to provide that information. OPR does have processes for investigating unprofessional conduct, right? And does, this bill would give them the statutory authority to make those things public in a different way than we have right now. I think it would provide clear standards for higher education, career and technical education centers, hiring managers. And I think you guys heard some testimony about the fact that that is kind of confusing for people to run that gauntlet and to figure out what, right now, to figure out what people are, qualifications people have, or even if they they might have qualifications that look the same, but like, were they really based on the same competencies, right? Do you know what that person knows how to do? Do you know what that person was really trained to do? If, because we do have so many pathways to qualifications right now at the different levels within licensing regulations. So again, relative to this idea of like everybody getting on board with the same competencies and the same training to the same standards and the same priorities, this would, I can see how, and we've heard that it would provide some clarity there, and it would provide direction for CDD too, in terms of like, this is how we should be orienting our workforce development efforts. Also, right, it would, it could be confused with different AOE licensing credentials. Again, I don't think the educators would have trouble understanding that. I don't think the employers would have trouble understanding that. I can see how there might be some members of the public who might, that like might not totally appreciate, what the difference is right now. But I also think they right now, they don't know very much at all about what the standards, what the qualifications are of the educators in their programs. So so yes, there's a possibility for confusion, but there is also a possibility for greater understanding. And then just pointing out, right, this would require us, over time to revise childcare licensing regulations, I think, to sort of align with scope of practice. But again, it's a pretty long runway, if this would pass, from a practical perspective, we can see sort of like layering this in and then sort of layering out some of the other paths over time. So.
What's your understanding of what's happening sort of at the national level or with, with other states, with your sister states out there in terms of what they are, what they're doing in this way?
Yeah, so different states are tackling it from different perspectives. So for example, I think in Missouri, where I think that they have like, or in North Carolina, where they're really from where their career and higher education is more centrally managed than here in Vermont. They have said, so like in North Carolina, right, like every high school offers the same courses that meet the same competencies. And then those courses clearly articulate to what you can get at the community college, that clearly articulates what you can get at at all of the state colleges, right? And so they have built in they're organizing things around EC1, EC2, EC3. Same thing in Missouri, right? We don't really have exactly those same vehicles in Vermont just because of the way that we make decisions, because of the more diversity in terms of how things are approached at the high school level and then also at the collegiate level. So it's so people are using a little bit of different pathways, and then there's other places, and then there are more places that are looking again at professional licensure as the vehicle, but aren't quite there yet. So.
And are there any lessons to be learned from other states with respect to the issue of transparency and accountability for individual workers?
Ooh, I don't know the answer to that question. Sorry, I can look. I can see.
In terms of, we have a fiscal note on this. The fiscal note really is only related to the increase government costs at the Office of Professional Regulation, because they can't really predict what the potential impacts would be on both CDD in terms of CFAP or on individual families in terms of what private businesses may or may not do. But, you have many years in this field. What is your judgment about what you think that the impact is going to be? I mean, knowing already that we have a CCFAP that is requiring on a substantial portion of general fund to supplement it, and knowing already that, even with the changes in Act 76, people still feel cost burdened,
Mhm.
by childcare. So I'm just wondering what your thoughts are about that, because I would expect if people
Mhm.
do the work to achieve these competencies, they would expect to be paid more.
So I have a couple of thoughts on that. So one is, the cost modeling that was done by Rand already assumed EC 1, 2, and 3. So that initial cost modeling that was done to develop the rates that we're paying right now, which again, I know that we didn't get to exact 100% of where we wanted to, but that initial cost modeling did assume lead educators with BAs and lead educators with AAs and BAs and assistants that had credentials. So that initial modeling that was done by Rand did include that. I think that the conversation at the time had been, and over the years, sort of in the field, has been, we're not gonna increase qualifications without providing resources. And I think that Act 76 provided, did provide a lot more resources. So for instance, for family childcare homes, right, also the removal of the tiered reimbursement system for childcare financial assistance went from, had moved everybody up in terms of, moved anybody that was below 5 stars up in terms of their rates. And then there were increase in rates up 35%, right, for everybody. And then for family childcare homes, they got another bump. So family childcare homes, so as an example, right, like a family childcare home that was at 1 star to somebody that is now, to what they're getting paid now. They're getting paid more than twice the amount that they were getting paid by the state before.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so I guess I'm saying I guess that was the order of operations that was discussed at the time, was increase the rates and that first. And so, I would say that was the modeling that was done and that was there. So, there's already, I think the other piece too, there's already a ton of qualified people working within this field. Like there's already so many people who, again, right, against all practical, right, considerations, have decided this is their work, this is their passion, and they're doing it, right? And, I was sitting yesterday, I was at the Parent Child Center Network conference, right? And I was sitting next to 3 women who work in their early childhood education program, and one of them had started working. These are women, right? They have children of their own, right? They're working in the program, but one of them had already earned her AA, 2 of them were, and she was like, okay, I'm taking a break. I just got remarried. I'm taking a break. I'm going to, but I'm in the fall, I'm going to start at the Vermont State University for the online AA to BA program. I do want to get, and she was like, I think I want to head, for her, she was like, I think I want to head to my AOE teacher licensure. That's what that program is specifically designed for. And the other 2 women that were there were like, nope, we're at CCV, we're enrolled, we're gonna, we're working through to get to our AAs. I just want to there's a lot of people who've already done the work and a lot of people that are enthused about doing the work. So
out of the, I forget the exact number of 7,000 and some out of
Mhm.
there, what percentage of those people think meet the qualifications of 1, 2, or 3?
So this is a place that it is, I could have probably done more analysis for this meeting. But it is a little tricky, right? Because we don't have perfect information on everybody who works within the field. And so we don't have perfect information. Everybody works within the field. I do think for people that are working within those lead educator roles, I think the majority of them, I think many of them meet those qualifications of having an AA or BA, like the majority of them do. I think for some of the folks that are in the support roles, this is an increase in qualifications for those support roles. Many of the people working in support roles, again, meet the qualifications. But I want to also say for the people, there's also other vehicles, and I did actually.
No,
so I have better, I have a whole workforce report. I work really hard on it, and I just don't have the specific answer.
Okay, you do know, but we just don't have it right now.
Yes, okay, let me look. Maybe I have my notes here, let me see.
Okay, that it would be helpful to know.
Percentages, I have percentages in here somewhere. There it is, okay. No, here we go.
All right, there you go.
But I wrote these notes when I first testified in January and I forgot they were there. Okay. So right now, 64% of the impacted group have verified credentials. So it's only 64% that we have verified credentials there. Again, not everybody who works within the field has to have a verified credential, like it's like right now. So that's part, I mean, they're supposed to tell us in BFIS, but like they're not, but we have very high concentrations of reporting amongst people who are directors, lead teachers, and family childcare home providers. So we have, and among the staff members within center-based programs that we have, that we have information on, 61% of them have a verified associate's degree or higher. For family childcare homes, again, this is among all staff members. And so I do need to get back. I'm going to tell you a number, but I don't love it because I don't think it's accurate. It says 26% of staff members have a verified associate's degree or higher. That said, the numbers that we're working with is 800. Right now, it's like we're looking at the 800 in family childcare, but there's really only about 400 programs. And so it's really that lead educator within the family childcare home that we're talking about in this program. People do have, and I think this came up in testimony, substitutes, aides, trainees, those people can work, they can count in ratio. They just can't hold themselves out as the lead educator. They just can't be the lead educator for more than 25% of the time within a program. So there definitely is a place still for people to come on board who are interested in the field, and they start as a trainee or an aide, and they would have to get some additional training to be able to move up to officially be an assistant, or to officially be what we call to officially be an assistant, or to officially be a lead a group of children for more than 75% of the time. And again, for substitutes right now in our regulations, what it says is if you're leading, if you're acting as a substitute for more than 30 days in 30 business days, sort of within a year in a particular role, then you need to get the you need to be qualified for the position that you're holding, because you're a long-term sub. So that's those for the substitutes. But if you're a substitute who's coming in to fill gaps and things like that, I mean, you have to have a background check, you're supposed to pass the basics, but this bill is not saying that every single one of those substitutes, needs to immediately be qualified, or saying that every single person a program hires needs to be immediately qualified at BC1. They would just come in as a trainee or an aide. And again, that would just provide more, I think, or provide more clarity to parents on like who the folks are in terms of those programs. And this is a person who's new and still learning. And this is a person who, has what, again, the national standards are saying is the basic level of training that needs to be there. So I do think for family childcare homes, again, it says 26% staff members, but I really want to pull, and I pulled a subset of this when we were doing the UPK work, to look at who has when we did the UPK work, I pulled a subset we looked at just the family childcare provider qualifications, but at that moment we were trying to cut the data just for AOE educator licensure. So I don't think I looked at the full. I only looked at the ones that were UPK partners. We didn't look at the full set, but I could get that information.
What's the date on that most recent?
So this is
report?
so this would have been data that was from December 31st, 2024. So, and then the report was published in January, but it was coming out a year, it was a year, the data was a year old at that time. And again, based on, the trend recently has been more folks meeting qualifications, active enrollment.
We've put millions of dollars into professional development, so that's a good thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I guess I would be shocked if the data went in a different direction. When we revise this, we do have again, with the funding from the preschool development grant, can't remember where we are. We are hiring, I think we're in the contracting process still, for an entity to do an external workforce report for us right now using our administrative data, but then to do even more sort of sophisticated analysis of what we've got. to try to answer some of the questions, to give us a clearer path on how many, what is that gap between where we are right now and where, maybe where we'd ideally be in terms of supports. I do, I want to recognize, right, this bill does increase those minimum qualifications, but I would also point out, right, given the conversations we've already had in this committee and the conversations around pre-K, it does align, right, with the national frameworks and the evidence around quality early childhood education and child development. So, it aligns with the NAEYC competencies. It aligns with the NIER, which is, right, the National Institute for Early Education Research's pre-K standards. And it actually aligns with the Head Start standards. So Head Start requires this, or these are already the standards that are in place for Head Starts and Head Start partners. So this is, so that's a piece of information to keep in mind. We can see at CDD the ways that this could allow us to simplify some of our licensing regulations and regulatory practice in the future, not just by the fact that OPR might take over some work, but also I think we could simplify some of our regulations when we don't have a standard base of training for everybody who works within childcare. We have to spell out a lot in our regulations because we can't know that they've been trained on that in some other place. I think, so that's part of why some of our regulations are pretty long, is because we're spelling all of that out. And I think there could be some places, they'll probably still be kind of long. Because there's just places, right, where it's like, you're saying like, it spells out like, what does it mean to have a clean facility, like in detail, right? Because, like how I clean my kitchen might be different than how my 14-year-old son cleans my kitchen, right? Like you just gotta you gotta spell these things out sometimes. So there's still gonna be more in there, but we can see that possibility. We do see that it could build on our workforce development efforts, right? We've got scholarships, apprenticeships, like our workforce development efforts, plus the states, right? In terms of making just college at CCVE and at state colleges more affordable for families, especially, and for people, especially who have from families with, I think this is right, makes less than $100,000, right? Is the standard right now. So, there's a lot of programs that can make it so that those folks that are committed to doing this work, can do that at very, ideally, at no or very low cost. That said, right, it's not just about tuition, it is about time, right? It's like, right, it will require some additional post-secondary work for folks. For some folks that will look like expenses for the program. And I think what we know in general is that there is for higher education in general, right? People are very skeptical, they just get sticker shock, even when there are scholarships, right? That's like the big debate of do you subsidize state college tuition or do you offer lots of scholarships? And because we do see that not having affordable, not just people aren't convinced, right, that this can be affordable for them, even when you're sort of saying allow me to show you all these options. So it really could, we absolutely see that it could deter some people from entering into the field and growing in the field, that is a real thing. We also can see how it could really support retention and reduce turnover, right? If you're trained for your job, if the people that are working with you in your job know what they're doing, that makes for a much more rewarding and enjoyable work experience, right? You're not, that's sort of the overwhelm and the burnout. I can see, we can see that could be reduced, and turnover really is a really significant issue in this field. And I guess the question is, to what extent do you think that's because people are entering without a real sense, or programs are hiring people without a clear plan for what is the training or support that they would need to be able to do these jobs with a really vulnerable population at a really critical time in their development. And then, finally, I think this is what you guys have been struggling with, right? It's really difficult to predict, these new requirements, whether or not they're going to be seen sort of as a burden or a support. And obviously there's not going to be full agreement on what those, it's going to depend on your position in lots of different ways, whether or not it feels like a burden or a support. So like I said, those are the three, I think, let's see. Okay, I have a couple other points I wanted to make quickly. But again, like the big three things that we're seeing, again, sort of in our analysis of the bill is the decision-making authority, right? The increased qualifications and transparency and accountability, right? Being sort of the three major areas to really wrestle with, which I know you guys are wrestling with. And then in terms of additional observations, I would say agency education has raised, what I think we think sort of are valid concerns about some confusion that could come from naming this license early childhood educator. And I think it's really specifically the ECE abbreviation because of the way that it's used in some of the other, in some of the K-12 circles, and then also in some of the interstate compacts is what they're telling me. Again, if you are interested in learning more, Andrew Powden, AOE, is definitely the expert on that topic. But what in talking with AOE, what we've agreed to sort of administration is if this is moving forward, an alternative title of early childhood education professional and like an abbreviation of ECP might be just like a reasonable compromise that recognizes that these folks are in early childhood education as the field, that they are professionals, but might avoid some of the confusion that comes from having a very similar acronym or the same acronym. Which again, I get it, like it is the field as a whole, but from the Senate version, they added in an option for transitional license for those entering into the field as family child providers. Definitely our initial read did have some concerns, even like last year, right? Concerns about what's the impact on the family child care home field. I think that the new transitional license, sort of that allows them a family child care home to move to an EC1 to an EC2 over a period of time while still running their business, addresses a lot of that concern. So people could start contributing right away, but then they could get that time and support to be able to complete their licenses. There are, many family childcare home folks who have taken that path, and I think you've probably heard from at least a couple of them, right? They jump into it because they need to. It's they want to and they need to. It's the right thing for them and their family at that time, and then they realize, oh, I need more training, or I love this. This is going to be my career, and I'm going to go on. I'm going to get my associate's degree. I'm going to get my bachelor's degree. I'm going to get my teaching license. I mean, there's so many examples of family child care educators who have made that choice. As that license, right, because it gives you it allows you to enter the field and gives you significant time. So if you're doing it for more than, I think it's 6 years, right, then you've decided that that's your career, at which point, if you're the lead educator for up to 10 or 12 children at a time, this bill is saying that you would need your, to be qualified as an EC2. And a lot of people entering into family childcare homes, they either have already worked in childcare in another setting. So they have qualifications and training at some level. I mean, again, it doesn't map perfectly necessarily, or they have some college. They might have gone to college in a different field. They're not scared of college. They just didn't take the child development courses because they were a scientist or whatever it was at that time. So, the final piece I would just make note, right, is this will require work from CDD, right? We would need to adapt our licensing regulations, adjust our workforce registry and monitoring function, adapt our workforce development initiatives to prepare for these changes. And so,
And do you think that the ramp on this is long enough for you to do that?
I do. I think that we could do it. Yeah. I mean, it'll definitely be a just, but we have strong folks on that. I think that, and again, that strong partnership that we already have with around workforce type registry functions and our professional development committee and things like that could support us in that. So
Thank you so much, Janet. Appreciate all of this information and your ability to kind of distill it down to the things that will change, the things that are benefits, the things that might still be questions, and appreciate that. And appreciate all the work that you and your staff have done to implement Act 76 over the last few years. It really is making a difference, and your leadership has made a difference there. So, I just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you, Teresa, and I will pass the thanks on to my team too. Okay, great.
Okay, Emily.
Good
Welcome.
morning. I don't think I've officially testified in front of the committee yet this session, so excited to be here. For the record, my name is Emily Tenenbaum. I am the Executive Director of the Let's Grow Kids Action Network. I'm also a parent of 3 young children. One is in childcare in Burlington, and I had an exciting conversation about a gardener snake this morning before I left. So she's doing amazing things in her program. I'm forever grateful for our early educators and the way they've helped me parent and also help my 3 kids, because they've been some of my greatest teachers along with my kids. So I am here to voice my support for S206, the Early Educator Profession Bill. As a parent, I want to make sure our early educators have the supports they need to thrive, and I want to ensure that more early educators enter the field. So families like myself, but mostly for those families that don't currently have access across the state, can easily access quality childcare no matter where they live. In my role with LG CAN and through my work with Let's Grow Kids before this, I can tell you the field really needs this bill. They've been asking for professional regulation and recognition for years. We really want to make sure we pass it this session. So before I make the case for S206, I know we've talked a little bit about what we did, is the recap of where we've come and how far we've been. So under the leadership of you, Chair Wood, and others, we've come really far. And this committee has long been at the forefront of a lot of that work and progress in Vermont. So I know we just said thank you to Deputy, but thank you for this committee and the work that you all have done on that. In 2021, we worked together on H171, which is now Act 45, which set the foundation for equitable, affordable, high-quality childcare in Vermont. So this law lays out a future system where no family spends more than 10% of their household income on childcare, and all families with young kids have affordable access to high-quality childcare and early education. Vermont's early educators are fairly compensated and well supported. So just wanted to kind of reframe that and bring us back to those high goals. As part of Act 45, leaders put in motion an official financing report by an external expert that we talked about with the deputy earlier. And in that report, it confirms a couple things that I just want to just grounding in where we are, including the 10% of income and where early educators are fairly compensated was well within reach. So that's kind of reflecting what Deputy Secretary just went over. The 2023 session proved to be a historic one that many of you were part of, and this committee once again took leadership and a role in crafting that historic legislation and the law we now know as Act 76. So we're in our 2nd full year of implementation. It feels like we've been at this forever, but that's really, really early in implementation, right? And I think we're already seeing amazing progress, and I have to remind myself too that we're pretty early in this. And we are already seeing that tremendous return on the investment. More families can afford care, more programs are opening and expanding, especially in rural communities. So some of which are seeing their first childcare program ever, which is pretty incredible, whether it's a center or a family childcare program. And that means more Vermonters are able to participate in the workforce. And we all know that's what we've been talking about a lot here. Like, how do we bring more families and how do we make it a place where people can live and work? And childcare has really made that possible. So currently, nearly 10,000 families across the state are receiving childcare financial assistance. For many families after Act 76, that's meant hundreds or thousands of dollars of savings like a month. Like, that is really significant, life-changing affordability measures that you all put in place. And you all should be very proud. Vermont has also made progress on the capacity. So over the last 2 years, 100 new programs, 1,200 new spaces, and we're seeing a growth in the early education workforce, which has increased by 8%, which is great to hear and see. And that totals that number you just saw with the 7,000 early educators. Family childcare homes are also a critical part of this workforce, which I know this committee has really centered, and especially in our rural communities. And their ability to grow and sustain their businesses is directly tied to this new investment and whether a state will continue to invest in this sector. It allows these small businesses to make decisions about adding a teacher or allowing other educators and kids to thrive. So after years of decline, these programs are beginning to rebound, which is a really, really notable thing to see, because other places they're not seeing that. They're seeing that go the opposite direction. So this continued progress means full implementation of Act 76, and the data shows where we need to go next, which leads me to Act 76. The gap that really is remaining is that high quality childcare spaces and Vermont families with young children need. And a lot of these programs are just struggling. We've heard this time and again across committees this year, that they're really struggling to hire and retain these early educators. I mean, even right before Act 76, and even you continue to see that loss of staff, and some people are there 3 or 4 weeks and then they leave. And so that continuity of care for kids is really hard. Like whether it's a mom dropping off her infant or me with my 3-year-old wondering where Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so went, like that is really some of the struggle we see across the board. The early education workforce shortage is really a primary barrier to childcare access across Vermont for families. So S206 is a direct response to that challenge, and I think it's been a really thoughtful approach that's been worked on for nearly a decade. And it's really been driven by the workforce itself, which I think is really important. I'm not sure you often see a situation where a workforce is saying like, hey, like we want to be recognized and we also want to be regulated in the way that they're talking about. So really been incredible to watch Vermont AYC and OPR really engage with the field and understand concerns and make adjustments. Last year when we were working on the bill, so that's been really, I've learned a lot and it's been a really incredible experience. So we wanted everyone's perspective and voice to be heard as part of that conversation. And between 2018 and 2022, more than 1,000 educators from both family childcare homes and centers shaped these recommendations for a unified professional identity, qualifications, and licensure. And I was just reflecting on being unified. And like I think the Deputy Secretary just went over how critically important it is to be unified, both nationally, but in the state. So everyone has strong alignment, both from parents understanding, but for people to understand what it looks like to be an early educator in the state. So the Office of Professional Regulation independently also reviewed and affirmed all of those recommendations on their own when their Sunrise Report, which they do for lots of professions and lots of different scenarios in Vermont. And so the legislation was drafted, which is the latest version that you all are looking at, and which the Senate passed, notably with bipartisan support and reflecting a strong agreement that this is a workforce informed solution, but also a workforce strengthening. So we talk a lot about workforce in Vermont and what this can look like. So this committee laid the groundwork for Act 76 and Act 45 with a clear goal that early educators should be compensated on par with their peers in other fields. Act 76 contains legislative intent acknowledging the need for continued progress on increasing early educators' wages. And we're really already seeing that. And it was already kind of calculated in the cost that we saw and really leaned on in terms of the National RAND report. So as you've heard in recent testimony, program directors continue to struggle to recruit and retain staff, and wages still lag behind comparable professions. And stagnation will kill the progress we've made on Act 76. So I'd love to come in and report all this progress. If we don't continue on the path that was set, we're going to see either a backslide or kind of staying in the same place that we've been in. So I appreciate I want to share the progress, but also a note that like we want to keep seeing that kind of progress. There's new kids coming in, there's kids being born. We want to recruit new families to live and work in Vermont. So we really want to make sure we're continuing this incremental increases to CCF and reimbursement raise, to essential to raising wages. Not this session, but just as we talk about bigger goals of why we're all here and what we're doing on childcare. So since the passage of Act 76, the legislature has continued to make small investments to incrementally increase CCFAP rates, and we will continue to need those incremental increases, again, not this year, but in the future. And at the same time, the professional licensure bill is a framework that is set out in S206. It's kind of critical step we need to recognize the expertise in the field, create those clear pathways for entry and advancement, and ensure the accountability for this level of public investment. So I think those are all, I think everyone has highlighted in different ways all of those things. So right now, professional requirements for early education vary across settings, makes it difficult for both educators and employers to understand what the qualifications are needed for different roles. It leaves parents unsure of what the qualifications are for their educators in classrooms. I think about, like when I go to the hospital, I can see on the name tag, like it's RN or it's a doc, like, and it really helps them understand who's providing care, right? You don't have that same, I love all our early educators. I have no idea like what those qualifications are and if they're the lead teacher, if they're not. So I think that is something that's just interesting that's done in other professions. So this bill is a necessary step to ensure this workforce continues to attract new talent, create jobs in our rural communities, and retain amazing early educators that are already doing this critical work. There are questions about how changes like this will impact the current workforce. I want to be really clear. we've heard them, we've understood them. And from day one, the number one concern has been about increasing qualifications and avoiding unintended consequences, such as driving people out of the field or causing program closures. And so this bill was designed with that in mind. The past decade of work has been done with that in mind, and it's kind of continually changed and updated. And we heard concerns this year, last year, and it really has included this 8-year phase timeline and implementation, which you heard the deputy just said that's a reasonable timeline, including the 2-year ramp up period to make those changes. So I think everyone's pretty aligned that the phased implementation timeline works, and creating the pathways for the current early educators to meet these qualifications over time. And when you break it down over those 8 years and really understand, there is a lot of opportunity. Both some folks will meet those expectations of qualifications right away, and then there's a really strong timeline and support mechanisms to do that. And I really, really believe that this will help retain, strengthen the workforce and not shrink it. And I want to reiterate here that the sports and timeline in the bill were also vetted by the early education workforce. That does not mean that there's not some folks that may not like it or are worried about change or don't understand it. But when we've had time to sit down and engage with folks, almost always folks are like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Or my questions are answered, or thank you for making that amendment. So I want to be really clear about that. And I know a lot of folks are concerned about family childcare homes in rural Vermont. I spent my first couple of years in rural Vermont. I lived in southern Vermont and was in a family childcare setting. My parents relied on that work to go to work, and really it was a good experience. But that, I want to make sure families in rural communities all have that kind of access and experience. They are really the backbone of the system and a community. And when childcare is available in those communities, parents can work. But when it's not, these local businesses are really having trouble hiring, and they can feel it immediately, both in retention of their employees, or people are showing up late to work, or they're unable to be there for a week. And the individual professional license system creates an opportunity for family childcare educators to be and have the same opportunities that the center-based educators do. So we've really made sure those are aligned in a way that allows them to have the same access. So at its core, the bill is about equal opportunity and resources for both educators and our youngest kids. Strengthening the workforce through for Senate Bill 206 helps ensure that family childcare homes in rural Vermont can continue to grow and serve their communities. Concerns about the way this bill impacts rural communities were definitely raised in the Senate. We had lots of conversations. The bill was adjusted to make it even more clear in this area. This bill includes, for example, like longer transitions for family childcare providers, and provides exemptions for people currently running family childcare programs. So if someone's serving as a family childcare provider right now, currently they are there, there is a legacy pathway where they literally just have to say OPR, here's who I am, and they don't have to do any of the things we've been talking about today in terms of the qualifications. So long-term public investment is helping programs grow and is improving the quality of childhood education. But to meet the needs of families and Vermont businesses, we need more early child educators. So we do have some, and we are seeing progress, but we still need more. I don't have the numbers. I know someone will probably ask me, but we can get those numbers for you. But we cannot be stagnant and slow in how we address this, because every year we don't take action on it. Our progress on childcare as a state is not guaranteed, and I want to make sure we're continuing that upward trajectory. So I'll end with this. Through the last decade, early educators were included in all 3 pillars of our childcare transformation: access, quality, affordability. Their engagement focusing on Vermont's children has empowered this essential workforce. And they now believe it's really their turn to make sure that we fully recognize them as the amazing people they are in our society and the early educators they are for each and every family. And I think they've seen like really amazing hope from what you all have done the past 2 or 3 years and felt really supported, and know that change is possible. And so it's not always easy, but it is possible. And I feel like Vermont does hard things in that realm. And even though there are questions and uncertainties, they also know that something needs to be done. And in the same way, Vermont has prioritized affordability and access. I want to make sure our childcare, early childhood educators are really at the forefront. So thank you for your time and considerations. I'm definitely happy to answer questions. I will say there are so many experts just in this room right now, so I might not be able to answer all the specific questions, but happy to discussions, anything that's helpful. Yeah.
And could you please make sure to send your testimony into Lori?
Yes, I think on the way over here, someone might have
I did
somebody
that.
that can
Okay.
confirm for me. Maybe.
It's not on our website yet,
Oh, okay. Yes,
so I'm not.
thank you.
Yeah, there we go.
Sorry, we were making changes up until last minute. I was trying not to be too long, but also I talk fast, so if you tell me.
I will say, I can concur that you talk fast, but
Not too fast.
quickly.
Okay, sorry.
So-
I always get worried taking up too much time. Y'all are
No.
really
Not at all.
doing a lot of things.
Questions from committee members? I think, one of the things that you talked about is this coming from the field, that the field is interested in this and, we definitely heard about, responses to surveys and things like that. But we also did hear from other folks in the field saying that, yeah, somebody might have checked off a box that said, yeah, we'd like to be recognized, but did they really understand what that meant? And other folks who really don't even really know about this yet. And of course, it's, that would happen in any field, or any kind of change like this. So I'm just wondering if you have any advice about how to ensure that there's continued outreach to the field, and particularly the workers, not just the owners and not, so the people who are going to be actually probably most impacted.
Yeah, I think that's what's most compelling is I really been listening to a lot of testimony and talking to a lot of folks both in and out of committee rooms. And I think there's broad support generally for this, right? And so you're just hearing concerns about how we do it, the mechanics of it, the technical aspects. And so, and I've learned a lot on the OPR side. It's amazing work that they do. And so I hate to put more work on OPR, Vermont AYC, and folks that probably have limited budgets and capacity, but I think there's a lot of opportunity there, especially in that 2 years when we're working in rulemaking and all of those pieces to really engage. And I always, as an organizer at heart, think we can always keep going and doing better on engagement. Like you're never going to talk to everyone. You're never going to have engaged everyone. And I think we can help. And I don't know what this looks like, but support program directors to talk to their folks. Because a lot of the problem is we don't have the access to actual names and contact information for some of those early educators, which if it was at OPR, we would, by the way. But right now we don't have all that. So we're really relying on all the program directors to translate that. So how do we think about that as we continue this work is really important.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Emily. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And
No, thank you. Thank you. The thank goes to you for all your work and consideration. I appreciate it.
I see we have Mary on. Mary, we're going to take just a brief 10-minute break and then we'll be back on. So Lori, if you can take us